Hey guys, I'm BC1 again, and today I've got another expanded deck list. This is my Eels list. I don't necessarily want to call it Ray Eels because there's only 2 Rayquaza in the deck and it uses a lot of different attackers, so I'll jump right into it. This is the list. Alright, so for the Pokemon, we have a very unorthodox line. There's still the standard 4/4 Eels, so I think pretty much every Eels deck has 4/4 Eels. Don't know why you would do it any other way, but sometimes people like to run weird lines. So yeah, just 4/4 electric just makes it really consistent. You need to get like 3 electrics in place. You need to have like a high count of them. Then there's only 2 Rayquaza EX, which is kind of strange. Most lists run 3, but I just found that you only really need 2 because the deck runs 2 Super Rods, so you can recycle them easily anyway. I've never really found a need for another Rayquaza, especially because I have so many other attackers too. I have 2 Raikou EX, which is kind of strange. A lot of people don't run 2 Raikou, but I thought it was a good idea, mostly because of the second attack, Volt Bolt. It does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon, then you discard all the electric energy attached to it. So this is going to help in one of the deck's worst matchups, which is against Garbodor decks. So if there's a Garbodor in play, you can just use Volt Bolt, do 100 to it on the bench. You don't even need to Lysander it, you can just do 100 to it on the bench, knock it out, and then basically the matchup becomes a great matchup because then you can use all of your abilities again. You can use Dynamotor and Rush In. So that Raikou is really good for that. And Seismitoad is usually paired in those decks that run Garbodor, so that's why I run 2 Raikou instead of 1, because it's going to be harder to search it out when you're item locked, so you really need to have the consistency of being able to get it. Plus, it's just very helpful against the Yveltal decks because it's the electric type, so you can one-shot them with it. Very, very strong. I love Raikou. And then there's 2 Keldeo. 1 works, but I went with 2 just because of consistency reasons, basically. You know, you can have 1 prize, and if 1's prized, then you're probably going to lose that game. You really need to get Keldeo into play for this deck to function, so I felt like 2 is really important. And then there's 1 Mewtwo. Mewtwo is there because basically X-Ball is just a really strong attack, and if you can just keep loading energy on it, it's the only attacker in this deck that doesn't discard when it attacks. So if you're having trouble getting enough electrics into play, electric the Pokemon into play, then Mewtwo can be good for that. It's also a very strong starter because you can start doing damage early game with it, so it's good for that. Also, just the type is nice, and it's good if you know, your attackers are weak to whatever your opponent's using. It's just a very versatile attacker. Plus, you can use it to Lysander up Garbodor and knock it out that way too. I know Raikou is already there for that, but it's just good in a lot of weird situations like that. It's just nice to have a different attacker, especially when you don't really need to run 3 Rayquaza. So I like Mewtwo. It could be cut from the list if I find that there's something more important, or I find that I need another attacker, but as it is now, I like it. For the draw support, we have 3 Tropical Beaches. Yes, you're looking at $450. Or at least that's what they used to be worth. Yeah, this is just good for early game. Basically, this deck runs 3 stadiums, so you can get it out early game and set up. Tropical Beach is extremely helpful in this deck just because, you know, it's just you're not attacking early game unless you're using Mewtwo anyway, so you might as well just keep setting up. This deck has a lot of cards that can be burned really quickly too, so you can thin your hand down to really low numbers and then fill it back up with Beach. And there's 4 Sycamore. You want to get energy in the discard as fast as you can, so Sycamore's great for helping out with that, plus it just helps you draw lots of cards. Extremely strong supporter. I don't know why you would run any less than 4 in this deck. 4N, also just great for setting up, and it's just a strong card, don't really need to explain it anymore. 1 Chorus, that's just there for, you know, later in the game. You're going to have a full bench probably, so you can draw a lot of cards with it. Just a very strong supporter. Not strong enough to really warrant 2 though, just because you don't really need more than 1. You don't even really need 1, it's kind of a luxury card, it's just there so that you have more draw support. There's 1 Lysander. That's a pretty low count. A lot of people probably won't like that, but my explanation for that is Rayquaza will one-shot anything anyway, So it kind of doesn't matter. You just knock out whatever's active, and then if you can't, then you have Lysander, the one. But if you don't have the one Lysander, you can always use Raikou to use Volt Bolt and snipe things on the bench that way too. So I feel like this deck doesn't really need a high Lysander count. You could always up it to 2 if you want. Maybe you want to cut this AZ for it. I wouldn't disagree with you if you did that. That's not a bad idea at all. But the AZ is here as kind of a tech for Lando Bats, because Lando Bats is a tougher matchup for this deck since they can hit Raikou and Electric for weakness, and they can just spread damage and knock out your Eels, which hurts pretty badly. So you have AZ, so you can pick up Pokemon that are damaged, and it's just nice as an all-around just good one-of effect supporter, because there is 3 Verse Seeker in the deck to grab it whenever you kind of need it. Also, there's a Battle Compressor in the deck, so you can always compress it the easy way, making it easier to Verse Seeker for. I just felt like in this deck you really want to have at least one kind of effect supporter, since you have the Verse Seeker and Battle Compressor engine. I feel like pretty much every deck should have at least one of like a Pokemon Center Lady or a Xerosic or an AZ, just because Verse Seeker is so strong. But yeah, AZ is just, you know, it's helpful in weird situations. Sometimes it'll make it so you don't lose a game because you can AZ up one of your damaged Pokemon so your opponent can't knock it out. It's situational, but helpful. And it's also really good against Toad, but this deck has a great Toad matchup anyway. For items, we've got 1 Computer Search, strongest A-Spec in the format, doesn't really need much explanation, it's just very good and consistent. 1 Battle Compressor. I originally had 2, and you'd think you'd run more than just 1 in an Eels deck, but with the 4 Ultra Ball and the 4 Sycamore, and just burning through your deck quickly with Tropical Beach, you really don't need more than 1. You get the energy and you discard pile quickly enough anyway. I find Battle Compressor, like, just usually isn't that needed. I could even cut the 1 out of the second, it would be fine. So yeah, I think 1 is fine. 1 Professor's Letter. This is mostly there just so you can get the fire energy, since you need fire energy to attack with a Rayquaza. Also helps get more energy in your hand, so you can discard them to get the energy acceleration with your Eels. So if you get a Professor's Letter in your hand and an Ultra Ball, you can Professor's Letter for 2 Electric and Ultra Ball them away, and then just Dynamo them back. So that's very nice. 2 Super Rod, this is just so you can get back your Eels, because strategy some people like to go for when they're going against this deck is they like to try to knock out as many Eels as they can so that you can't set up, and you just really need to get them back as quickly as you can. And I don't run Trump Card, so I felt like 2 Super Rod was important, especially when you only run 2 Rayquaza too. So Super Rod seems very good in this deck. You could cut down to 1 maybe, just because 1 is still satisfactory most of the time, but I feel like 2 just helps with the consistency, and I don't really need to fit anything else in this deck anyway. I have a lot of space with this list. Then there's 4 Ultra Ball, and also 4 Level Ball. This is just so you can set up your Eels as fast as possible. If you can start swinging with Rayquaza for 180 turn 2, that's ideal, so that's why we have such a thick search ball line in this deck. You really just need to set up as fast as you can, so that's why you have those. And then 3 Floatstone, this is just for Keldeo, so you can get that Russian retreat. That's another benefit of AZ. If your opponent head ringers your Keldeo, you can use AZ, pick it up, put it back down, and then put a Floatstone on it. So yeah, I think 3 is good. I wouldn't mind 4th, but I think 3 is fine. I haven't really needed more than that in recent history, but yeah, if I had a problem with Toad, I think I would go up to 4, but this list does not have a problem with Toad, because mostly just because of Mewtwo and Raikou EX. Those both help against Toad a lot, plus Eels are just super strong. Then for the energy line, we have 3 Fire and 9 Electric. This is just a very consistent number. I don't really feel like I'm ever missing my Fire when I'm trying to get Rayquaza going. With 3, I think 3 is enough, and then 9 Electric. I never really miss attachments with 9. Just very consistent and strong. So that's about it for the list. So that's about it. The Eels deck is definitely very strong, one of the top decks in Expanded. It was one of the best decks back when these cards were legal, and I think it still will be in Expanded now. It's definitely, my list is definitely kind of weird, it's unorthodox. I would encourage you to kind of play around with your own list. Don't necessarily just copy this 60 and play it, because you know, this list won't really fit everybody. It just kind of works for my play style. But nonetheless, it is a good list in my opinion, and you might want to try it out for yourself. So, thanks for watching. Comment if you want to tell me something, like the video if you liked the video, and subscribe for more.